All right, welcome back everybody to Lions Table Talk. We're here with the special guest Asa from Analytics with Asa, and we're going to be doing a mock draft, which is kind of pre-combine, but at the same time during the combine because the D linemen are running right now. How are you doing, Asa?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to kind of get into the meat of the offseason. And the combine is kind of like the unofficial start of all that. It's when the rumors start circulating. It's when you get the measurements for the draft players. Yeah, it's a good time to be a big football fan.
Yeah, you don't even know how many times I've heard of Miles Garrett to the Lions before it's even possible. But yeah, we're going to be making a lot of picks here today where obviously it's a lot of speculation at this time of the year. A lot of these picks that we make might not even be made by the team in that slot. So without further ado, Asa, you are the guest, so you can have the first pick of the draft and let's get underway.
All right. Yeah, this is kind of a difficult decision because you can either go quarterback and pick someone who could lead your franchise in the future, or you could pick one of, I think, three or four blue chip talents. And I
Hmm.
think honestly, the safer bet is to pick someone who, in a way, could lead your franchise and be a blue chip talent. And I think that's going to be Travis Hunter. And, I think
Ah,
potentially it could have been Abdul Carter. I think the foot thing was a bit of a scare, but I think it's just too easy of a pick. Travis Hunter is probably the best wide receiver in the draft. He's probably the best corner in the draft, and you get two players in one is just unbelievable. Now, I don't think he's going to play full time at both positions, but if he's part time at either, you still get immense value at that pick. So I feel comfortable with Travis Hunter.
all right, Travis Hunter, number one. And I agree. I feel that the interesting thing about Travis Hunter is what team drafts him and how they're going to play him.
Hmm.
Because Daniel Jeremiah actually believes that he should be a full time wide receiver slotting in at corner sometimes, but I think it should be the opposite, full time corner and play a few offensive snaps. So I think it'll really just depend on the team and the draft fit, really. As we come here, number two, the Cleveland Browns. As much as I love Abdul Carter, you have to move on from Deshaun Watson eventually. My gosh, not only is he a terrible person, he's a terrible football player, man.
Yeah.
He's not good anymore. We saw shades of brilliance down there in Houston with him, but as soon as he came over to Cleveland, it was just like he was a whole different player. And I feel like this would be the start to just flushing out that whole Deshaun Watson era. I don't think you can cut him, not yet at least, but bring in Cam Ward, see what he can do. I think that that's just the best way you can do it.
Yeah, it's so weird because there's so much of like a domino that needs to happen in order to make us comfortable with making that selection. Because there's a chance Deshaun Watson's contract gets voided out because of the video of him dancing with his fiance, and so there's a lot of implications with that. And then additionally, we don't know what's going to happen in free agency. Like there's been reports about the
Right.
Falcons potentially keeping Kirk Cousins. I don't know exactly if that's going to be the case because I mean, I think Kirk is a competitive guy. I think he'll want to start on some sort of team. And I would not be surprised if they end up releasing or trading him. I'm not sure about the financial ramifications of trading him. So releasing him may be a more probable option, but I would not be surprised if he ends up reuniting with Stefanski. And if that's the case, Kirk may be a good bridge quarterback where he's your quarterback for 1 to 2 years while you let Cam Ward kind of marinate. And Cam Ward's not a super young guy, but his arm talent is a bit raw that may take some time to kind of reel in. So this kind of puts me in an interesting position because taking Cam Ward that early kind of it allows the Giants to do what they may have wanted to do this whole time, and that's take Shadur Sanders. But there's also these other really good guys like Abdul Carter. So
Yeah.
I think okay, I don't think Stafford's going to the Giants. I think it's possible, but you're going to have to give up draft picks. You're going to have to pay a lot of money, and you're going to have to get consent from every party in order for that to happen.
It's a pipe
So
dream
I
right now.
no 100%. And so I think probably the more likely option is they end up taking Shadur. I know Shadur kind of has his question marks as a player. I mean, I think he is talented, but his athletic traits aren't great. And the fact that he's not throwing in the combine kind of says either one, he's confident he's going to get picked high anyway, or two, he doesn't really trust his arm. Hopefully it's number one, but clearly Brian Dable trusts Shadur. Like he has a good relationship with him. You could see them like dapping each other up at the Senior Bowl. But yeah, I think Shadur is probably going to be the pick for the Giants.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I saw about that was pre-combine. Shadur met with three teams specifically, the top three teams,
Mhm.
and after the third team, he didn't take any more interviews. I think that that says a lot about how the top three teams view him,
Mhm.
and I think that if he's on the board with the Giants, which he should be, I don't think that they'll pass on him. I think that they're drafting for their jobs right now, Dable and Joe Shane. I think that this is going to be like their home run or strikeout pick.
Mhm.
And we get on to the New England Patriots. This is where, in my opinion, the draft really starts.
Mhm.
The Patriots, they could go a lot of directions with this. Do you want to give Drake May a receiving option, or do you want to give him protection? Because you can do either of those, and it would be a massive upgrade to what you have right now. Do you feel comfortable with Tedero and McMillan right here? Do you think that the pick is Luther Burden? In my opinion, I think Will Campbell should be the pick right here. Will
All right.
Campbell is a beast of a player. He can play guard. I think he could play tackle at the NFL level, but you're just getting a damn good football player right here. And I think that's what you need to do with the talentless roster as the Patriots have.
This also puts me in a very interesting position because yeah, Will Campbell is one of those guys, and I've kind of noticed this in this draft. There's a lot of kind of like tackle, guard, center hybrids in this draft. There's not like a ton
Hmm.
of elite pure tackles, but there's a lot of guys that can kind of do a little bit of everything, and Will Campbell's probably going to be at the top of that. But no,
Yep.
I totally agree. That's a good pick for the Patriots because you had the worst offensive line, you had terrible receivers, you had kind of terrible everything.
Yeah.
And so stepping up at least one of those things is a good position to be in. Um, Now, here's where things get interesting because if you're the Jaguars, you have good edges. Like you have
Yes.
Trayvon Walker and you have Josh Hines Allen, who are both really good. So I don't know if you take Abdul Carter. It almost
I
feels like a
don't think you
sin to just let
can.
him fall this far. Yeah. So
Right.
I think there's a chance. I think they're deciding between Ted McMillan, who might be the perfect pairing with Brian Thomas Jr., or Mason Graham. So with Mason
Mm.
Graham, you get probably the best young defensive line in football. And then with Ted McMillan, you get not just one elite wide receivers, but two or two potential elite wide receivers. So I think I'm going to have to go Mason Graham just because he's someone who can help stop the run. And he's also like a really good pass rusher as a three tech. Now, he did kind of come in a bit underweight and undersized in the combine. His arms were a bit shorter than people expected, but he's still one of those guys that to me is probably the safest pick in the draft, aside from maybe Abdul Carter, just someone who you know is going to be at the very least a B plus player, and his
Yeah.
ceiling is much, much higher than that.
This puts us in such a weird position, man. Abdul Carter is falling in this draft. And the Raiders, they have so many needs outside of edge. You have Max Crosby. Here's the thing, though. I don't care. You have to take him. He's
Yeah.
there. He's potentially the best player in the draft outside of Travis Hunter.
Mhm.
That's your, if you compare him up with Max Crosby even for a year, because Max Crosby doesn't know how long this rebuild will be, you just have to do it and give yourself a chance there. It could be really fun off the edge for the Raiders for a long time if it works out. But yeah, I couldn't let Abdul Carter fall anymore.
No, I think that's a great pick. Like it may not be an immediate need, but one, edge rusher is always going to be valuable. Like there's teams that have 3 or 4 edge rushers and kind of treat it as like a hockey lineup, and a lot of times that's been successful. In fact, the Jets were one of those teams that kind of did that with Quinnen Williams a few years ago, where he'd play like 60% of snaps, which is much lower than you'd expect for someone that talented. So if they have to go based on something like that, it may not be a terrible idea. But like, come on, it's Abdul Carter. Like
Yeah.
he might be the first pick in the draft, just based on his talent, and he has that little foot problem, but like reports came out today that that may not require surgery. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being fine. And even if he's
Yeah.
not okay for the first year, you have a really, really good guy who can start over him. And so I think we're going to be okay with the.
Explosive is all get out too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I think he's a great player. So I would not be surprised if he ends up. Well, I mean, I would be surprised if he falls this far. I would not be surprised if he gets taken 3, 4 picks earlier than this.
Yeah.
So I'm also, again, in a kind of interesting position because the Jets have quite a few needs. Obviously, they have a huge question mark at quarterback, but they can't take really anyone this high that has not already been taken. Their defensive interior,
Jackson
aside from
Dart.
Quinnen, yeah, exactly. Their defensive interior is not great right now, but it may be a bit early to go with a guy like Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan. I mean, it depends on how Grant does in the combine, just because I know that guy's a freak.
I
But
don't think he's running actually.
oh man, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it
But
is.
so I think this sounds a little bit wacky, but I think I'm going to go Tet McMillan, and
Ooh.
it really depends a lot on what they do with Devontae Adams. Like he's probably going to get cut for cap reasons, but
Yes, I'm sure.
and yeah, there's a chance they end up trading Garrett Wilson. So Tet McMillan may come in as the wide receiver 1. He may come in as a wide receiver 2 to kind of like be the Robin to his Batman, and that's okay with me. So I think like when you get a player that good, I think he's also one of those guys that's really safe because his movement skills are great, and he's also 6'5". Like that just says a lot about him as a player. It's like almost Mike Evans-esque. I mean, I'm not going to crown him Mike Evans quite yet, but I think he's really, really talented, and I think he'd be great with the Jets so far.
I agree. I think that it's tough because Garrett Wilson has to be absolutely frustrated with the way his career's gone so far. And nobody would blame him for requesting a trade after the debacle that has been the Aaron Rodgers trade.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not in position to get a QB this year, so you might have to trade him for capital and take Seth McMillan to reset the rookie contract. And this leaves an interesting position for the Carolina Panthers here. They have a lot of needs. And based on how he's run today, I it's an interesting spot for him because there has been massive reports of his character concerns leading up to the draft. And we've even seen someone on Twitter say they were with him in high school and he was just the worst. But you can't argue a 4.47 40 at at this at this range and 243.65. This is a guy you take here. The Especially with Derek Brown coming off of an injury, you can take James Pierce, and if he pans out the way you want, you have a defense. You can't keep going into games allowing 30 plus points and telling Bryce Young, good luck, keep up, have fun. No, it's time for James Pierce. And it's interesting because he could go really high like this, or he could fall because of the reports coming out, but I think this is a good spot for him.
Yeah, and it's like edge position is one of those where it's based on strength. So it's a strong link position where it's good to have someone who's elite, and maybe someone who's mediocre better than it is to have two kind of above average players. And James Pierce Jr., he's really long. He's a bit light at 245 at the edge position, which makes him a little bit more of like a pass rushing specialist, but he's so good at jumping the snap. And that's a skill that is really translatable to the NFL. I mean, maybe you're not going to jump it quite as often, but he's really good at translating that speed to on the field plays. And that was kind of a concern is, okay, is he just really good at jumping the snap, or is he someone who actually is really fast? I think he proved today he's really, really fast. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a good pick for him. Now I am the Saints. Yeah, the Saints are also in an interesting spot because they have some needs at receiver and they have some concerns really with the concussions in Chris Olave. So,
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully that doesn't mean his career kind of gets shortened. But if you're getting this many concussions, and if you get a concussion towards the end of the season that takes you out for the rest of the season, that's not a great sign.
And if we all know what Derek Carr likes to throw up there towards
Mm-hmm.
his receivers, he's not going to be in a safe spot all year.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like you have other talented guys who are also in that room, but like these guys also got hurt as well. So
Right.
yeah, I think I'm going to take Luther Burden
Luther
just so
Burden.
that you get a guy to either pair with Chris Olave or someone that you end up treating as the wide receiver one over Chris Olave if his injuries kind of continue. And so
Yeah.
that leaves you with the Bears. This is where things get fun.
Whew. And this is the Bears, man. Went and got their guy probably a few weeks before we knew about it, Ben Johnson. But Ben Johnson has been around a system that relies on offensive tackles with Panay Sewell and Taylor Decker. The Bears, they need a good left tackle right now, I believe. They need a good guard. I can't stress that enough how good they need a guard. And Kelvin Banks is the perfect spot for that. I'm going Ashton Genty.
I was like, is he going to do
So,
it? Is he going to do it?
so Ashton Genty, oh my gosh, I would love to give him to the Dallas Cowboys, but you saw what Detroit did with Jameer Gibbs, and I think this is the perfect place for him. You can find this is a really deep guard class. We're talking about tackles that will be converted to guards. We have pure guards in there. It's just going to be crazy. And you can build through free agency as well. They have a good amount of cap space. So I think that the best shot is to give Caleb Williams that ground threat that honestly DeAndre Swift just isn't. He just doesn't have the vision that Ashton Genty can bring to a team. This is a 300 carry per year type of back right here. You can take him and be confident throughout that rookie contract. You have a real ball player. So that's why we're going Ashton Genty there.
No, I'm
Welcome
really
to the
happy you made that
NFL draft.
pick.
Woo!
I'm really happy you made that pick because Ben Johnson has kind of seen what it's like to have elite running backs.
Yeah,
And you had Jameer Gibbs, who was that lightning to why is the name slipping my mind?
Montgomery.
Oh yeah, Dave Montgomery's Thunder, and yeah, I think you know Genty's almost like a combination in the sense that you can treat him as a true workhorse, and
Hmm.
the free agent class for running backs is not great. Like I guess maybe Aaron Jones or Nick Chubb may be the best of those guys,
Nick
which is
Chubb. Oof.
yeah, and it's like I don't know. Maybe yeah, like there's a lot of guys that have big question marks at the free agent spot for running back. And so the draft is loaded with really good running backs. So if they're not taking a running back now, it's probably going to be later. But I totally understand the pick for Genty.
Not gonna lie, if Abdul Carter didn't drop as far, I would have given Genty to the Raiders
Yeah, no, that's
because
possible.
they have so many holes on that roster. It's BPA, but
Hmm.
he was right there. Carter was there, which gives you the 49ers.
Yes. I think this is a really easy pick because the Niners got Salah back, and Salah is one of those guys that likes to run a lot of like cover three, cover four style coverage.
Mm,
And that leaves the perfect guy to kind of act as that safety cornerback hybrid, and that's Jade Barron. I may be saying the name
yeah.
wrong, but he's a guy who played safety most of his career, and then is like, you know what, I want to play outside cornerback. And he's a little bit light, but he's someone who is really versatile, someone who can play safety, who can play corner. And I think that's the perfect kind of Swiss Army knife that Saleh is going to be looking for to kind of restart that defense that was really strong whenever he was the DC of the 49ers a few years ago.
One thing I want to point out now, because this is starting to come into effect like we knew it would after the COVID seasons. We're getting some older prospects here.
Mm-hmm.
23. This is because of that COVID gap, and a lot of players are going to be taking an extra year. I don't know how long this will last, but we're getting some of the older prospects now. But with the Dallas Cowboys, man, do they have to be pissed. If they don't trade up with Carolina and Ben Johnson influences the Bears to take Genty, ooh, buddy, I would be pissed if I'm the Cowboys because you need running back so bad. But I don't know if there's anything here that you can justify in the top 12. But there's a lot of needs that they have. And one interesting pick that I think that I'm gonna go with for the Cowboys is Jahad Campbell. I like Jahad Campbell coming off of his improvements in 2023 and 2024. He's weighing in at 6'3", 224. I don't know if that's the same for the combine, but this is a guy that you can plug and play in many different spots on the defense. He's good in run defense. He's good in coverage. He's good rushing the passer. This is borderline an exact copy of what you saw with the Cowboys taking Micah Parsons. He was an all around player that they eventually moved to a full pass rushing role. And I think you could do this with Campbell, but you could do it in any way you want. You could put him in coverage as well. And I think that's what his long term future looks like. I think he's going to be a Cowboy here if the board falls this way.
Yeah, I think you could have gone that or Mike Green, who's someone who had like just an elite Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Ooh,
Campbell's a great pick. So next up, we get the Dolphins. I don't see how the Dolphins could possibly exit this draft without taking offensive line.
I agree.
And this may be a little bit of a reach just according to PFF's big board, but I really like Armand Membu. He's someone who's about 6'3", which is a little bit kind of shorter to be a guard or to be a tackle, but he has really long arms. He's
Yeah,
someone who's just really good at not having weaknesses. Yeah, 314 is a little bit light to play either of those positions, but bulking up is not that difficult in the NFL. But he's someone who
agree.
just had absolutely zero weaknesses. And I mean, weakness is an understatement to describe the state of the Dolphins' offensive line last season, where you had Devon Achane, who's one of the best running backs in football, one of the most electric running backs in football, who was not an efficient runner last year. And I don't think he just all of a sudden regressed. I just think that when the offensive line is that bad, it just makes things so difficult to create space in the slightest. And Armand Membu is someone who you can either run at tackle, run at guard, but you're definitely improving at that position.
I agree. I actually thought that you were going to take him with the 49ers because Trent Williams isn't getting any younger.
That's true
And
too.
this leaves me with potentially the easiest pick of this entire draft. So the Indianapolis Colts, right? It's been no secret that they don't have a tight end right now that's reliable. And it's also not been a secret that Anthony Richardson has had some struggles with accuracy specifically. 6'6", 261. If you can't hit him, it's over. You're getting replaced. That's it. Tyler Warren's the pick right there. He's an elite pass catcher, route runner, and he can play in line if you need him to. It's just a home run pick right here.
Yeah, I think it's almost like, you know how people pencil in picks? I feel like you can
Yeah.
almost pin that pick. Like if he drops to 14, Does like is there going to be any time on the clock? Like
Yeah,
whenever it gets, yeah, it's like instantly that pick is getting sprinted in.
yeah. I remember when Aiden Hutchinson fell to 2, and I think that the Lions pick was within like what 4 seconds. I think
Yeah,
this would
yeah,
be the same thing.
yeah. Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson just drives across the street to the Lions facility. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just the easiest pick ever. And I think this one also is really easy because, I mean, the Falcons had a whole mess of an offseason last year, and Michael Penix was honestly one of the better decisions they made last year. But I think one of the easier decisions is Mike Green.
yeah.
Mike Green is an instant improvement on the edge. He's might be the best pure pass rusher in this draft. 6'4", about 250. And he didn't play at some giant school, so it's not like he was lining up against NFL caliber tackles all the time. But he was just so dominant that it was obvious that he was going to be really good. And then just to really cap it all off, for those who haven't seen, like if you haven't, you're living under a rock. But the rep that he had in the Senior Bowl, I think it was against Josh Connerly, but
It
yeah,
was.
completely levels that man. And he may have had the best Senior Bowl of all players. And so, yeah, that's just an easy pick. I don't think there's a chance he makes it past the Falcons.
I think the funny thing is that after that play, after he leveled Josh Connerly, he didn't do anything else. He opted out of all other drills.
He
He's
knew it,
opted
yeah.
out of the combine. He said, "My draft stock is as high as it's going to go. I'm done." But
No,
yeah,
that's the way to go.
Mike Green is great. The only thing that could hold back that pick is, man, does that Falcons GM Terry Fontenot, doesn't he love skill positions, man?
That's true.
he's he's drafted all of the offensive skill positions in his first 4 draft. He drafted quarterback, tight end, running back, and receiver. He does not like going on defense, and he doesn't like trenches, but Mike Green is good enough to where you have to.
Yeah, he almost drafts like I draft when I play Madden and I'm Madden GM. And I just like, hey, we can worry about offensive line later. Like, let's just focus more on the fun guys who actually get the ball in their hands.
Right. And here with the Cardinals, I think the pick is pretty easy. I think that Kenneth Grant is going to crush his pro day. And when he does, I think his draft stock might even drive a little bit higher than here, but man, this is a player right here. 339. That's a tank. And you need somebody to fix that run defense, and this is it. This is it. The Cardinals were not good in run defense the past year. You could really just see them going against teams who are just like, run it, stop it. That's it. And this will stop it. Having somebody 340 right in the middle of your defense who can move really well. Yeah, this is your pick right here.
Yeah, and the thing about Kenneth Grant is like he's giant, but he's not slow. Like I don't know if he's going to run a
Man.
40 at his pro day, but he's someone who has like had clips of him on Twitter chasing down running backs, and you're doing that whenever you are almost double their weight. Like that's just crazy. And
I,
he's
I
someone who, yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if he runs like a sub 5 if he runs
Yeah,
at his pro day, and that's insane to say.
hmm yeah, it's like that man can move and he's giant and he's an instant improver at run defense and he still has like the physical traits to be a pass rusher. So I would not be surprised if he improves in that regard, but he's just an instant put you at nose tackle, worry about you in 4 years.
That's why the Bengals right here are so pissed because they need
Yes.
it bad.
Yeah, I think I'm really torn between two players. So we have Will Johnson, who is kind of that cover 3, cover 4, not super fast cornerback, but someone who just has elite ball skills and is really, really intelligent. And then you have Walter Nolan, who is just like a complete physical freak. Like he's not quite as big as Kenneth Grant. He's 305 instead of 330, but he's someone who's lightning quick, was just a better athlete than almost anyone he's ever gone against. And the important thing is the Bengals need improvement at pretty much every spot on defense.
Yeah.
I almost want to save Walter Nolan to hope that he falls to the Vikings, but I think I'm going to pick Walter Nolan here because, cornerback, if you have one good cornerback, but you have a bunch of other terrible cornerbacks, the quarterback can just stop throwing it to that person. But
Yeah.
whenever you have Walter Nolan, who's always in the quarterback's face, who's always been a good pass rusher, that is someone who can affect the play, whether or not the quarterback wants it to or not. And so I think that's going to be my pick for the Bengals.
Especially with the disappointments that so far Miles Murphy has been for the Bengals.
Mhm.
He didn't get on the field very much at all in his rookie year. And when you're playing on a defense that is really bad at rushing the passer, if you're not getting on the field, there's a problem there.
Mhm.
So that brings us to Seattle. Ooh, buddy, did a guy fall for them? Here's the thing, you need interior offensive line really, really badly. And I would be sure Seahawks fans would love to see them go offensive guard or center. Here's the thing. Their GM has said on multiple occasions that he thinks guard is the most overdrafted and overpaid position in the league. He said that repeatedly, and he's made it known that that's his stance. I can't comfortably give them a guard if I don't think that he's going to take one. But what I can give them, Jalen Walker. This man is an athletic freak. He can play off the edge, he can play off ball, and I think that the Seahawks, their defense is spotty. They gave, I distinctly remember them giving up 40 plus to Detroit. And if you can just get a guy that's just a disruptor, a sure tackler, and he can cover these tight ends a little bit more as you have George Kittle in division, I think that you take that, especially with the depth of the guard class this year. If you don't want to take one in the first round, hey, you could take one down the board.
Yeah, so with the Bucks, I think I'm really torn between Will Johnson or Malachi Starks because
Agreed.
they kind of need a little bit of both. Um, I think Malachi Starks may be a better pure player, but I think Will Johnson is in the more valuable position at cornerback. So I think I'm going to go Will Johnson. I kind of described him before. He's someone who's not super fast. We'll kind of find out exactly whether or not that speed is at concerning level or just not elite level. But he's someone who has really good coverage skills. He kind of played most of the season hurt, which is why you see the 6 games on there. And
Yeah.
so, you don't have to worry that much about this season. But last season, the season before that, he was electric. And so I would not be surprised to see him go to the Bucks if he even makes it that far. But yeah, I think he's a great player. Would not be surprised if they end up picking him there.
And I think the slide right here with him comes from that injury, but also he has decided not to run at the combine. He's I think that that is gonna compound some real fears
Mhm.
about his speed specifically. But if he runs at his pro day, he has the chance to shut a lot of that up. Which brings up the Broncos. My gosh, the Broncos are an interesting team right here. There is no way that I can let Malachi Starks fall anymore. My gosh, this guy is an athletic freak. 6'1", 205. He's a hitter too. He can fly around the defense, and with the Broncos struggling in run defense against James Cook and the Bills in the playoffs, you can bring in Malachi Starks and he can come forth and be a run defender in obvious run plays, and he's good at it. He had 7 missed tackles this year, 3 the year before. He can be such a disruptor on this defense, man, and he's great in coverage.
All right, it leaves me to the Steelers. So the Steelers, you have a pretty easy choice here with Emeka Ibuka.
Mm.
There's other needs they may have at defensive back, and their quarterback situation's still kind of up in the air. We're going to pretend in this draft situation that they either got Sam Darnold or kept Justin Fields or kept Russell Wilson, but I think they were going to kind of temporarily patch up that quarterback position, which they've kind of been doing for quite some time now. But I think Emeka Ibuka is just a really easy pick. It's kind of a shame because I think he'd be really good with the Packers. But yeah, I'm going to take him just because he's one of those guys that's a great route runner. He's also one of these safer picks where he's not like some electric athlete. He's definitely still a good athlete, but the thing about him is he doesn't drop the ball a lot. He almost always gets open. He's just someone who you can always trust. He may not be some A+ player all the time, but he's the type of player who will almost always be B+ A- just about every game.
I agree. Uh, I don't think the Packers will miss out too much because they hate first round wide receivers with a fiery passion. But I think that brings up a pretty easy slot here for the LA Chargers. This one almost feels penciled in at this point because you have Jim Harbaugh. You need pass catchers. You need someone to help block in the run game. Enter Colston Loveland. This guy, he's not getting the love that Tyler Warren is, but my gosh, he's a good receiver. He can block a little bit, but man, you need to get bodies for Justin Herbert to throw to. You cannot go into another playoff game with Lad McConkey as your wide receiver one and nobody else to throw the ball to. We saw how that went. Don't let it happen again. Get Colston Loveland and just get yourself a nice receiving threat.
No,
Which
I think that's a
brings
great pick.
us which brings us to the least desirable team in the NFC North.
Yes, our mutual enemy here. So
Yes.
the Packers are also in an interesting position because they really need cornerback, they really need wide receiver. And so I feel kind of comfortable taking either one of those. Now, amongst the cornerbacks we still have left, there's a little bit of a drop off in tiers between your Will Johnson, your Jade Barron types, and Trey Amos, Savon Revel, guys like that. So I think they're going to take receiver, and I do think there's a bit of a cutoff between Emeka Ibuka and Matthew Golden, but I still think Matthew Golden is a really solid receiver. So, I mean, it may be unlikely that the Packers take a first round wide receiver because they have not done it in forever. But hopefully, this is going to be the time they actually make that decision because Matthew Golden's talented, and this season kind of proved you can be fine with a bunch of B receivers as your kind of all number twos, but you need someone who you can trust to just win in man coverage. And I think Matthew Golden is someone who can actually do that. And so I would not be surprised if they end up taking him. Hopefully they end up doing it. I mean, maybe hopefully not if we're both, Lions Vikings fans, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
I think that the interesting thing here is that Josh Jacobs went on a podcast and said to the host, "We need to go get a wide receiver one that we can go out and reliably catch the ball." And Dontavian Wicks replied to that with a thumbs down and laughing emoji. So obviously there's some turmoil in here, but Matthew Golden, he could really light up the combine with his speed, and I think that he really could help the Packers there. But it also does depend on what happens with Jair because
Mm-hmm.
Jair's probably gone, but he could stay. Who knows? It's Jair. But that brings us to your team, the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm trusting you here.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot, right? Because obviously you want a guard. I don't know if this is a good spot for one. You could obviously take Kelvin Banks. I don't think he's an NFL tackle. I think he's a guard. You have no corners left. There's some D linemen here though. Mikel Williams, especially in past mocks, I've been going Omarion Hampton here, but I think that there's more value at running back down the board.
Mhm.
than you can give to them right now. Just imagine this: a D line that features who's your rookie that you just took there?
Dallas Turner. So
Yeah,
we're pretty
Dallas.
stacked at edge rusher right now. I think
Yeah,
it's more the defensive interior that's needed.
yeah, and I agree with that. Do you think that you would be comfortable taking this man, or would you prefer us go Derek Harmon here? Whew, I think Derek Harmon is the pick right here, but
Mhm.
I'll accept your input because you are the Vikings fan here.
Yeah, so I would probably feel more comfortable with Derek Harmon because Michael Williams is like an athletic freak. He's 6'5", and his production hasn't been there yet. But teams tend to draft defensive linemen more for their traits than their production because they trust their coaches to kind of turn those traits into actual production. But Derek Harmon has great traits and has been productive in the NCAA. He's someone who I believe is close to leading the league in pass rush win rate, which is a little bit hard to say. Among defensive tackles, yes, 17.6%, which is
Whew,
really, really high for that position. And he's someone who
that's
ran
insane.
a really good 40 time, actually just today. And so I'd feel really comfortable with him. He's your three technique who can defend the run pretty well, but is probably the best pure pass rusher at the defensive tackle position. So I feel pretty comfortable with taking Derek Harmon here.
And that's the direction we're gonna go. I would have thought about Kelvin Banks Jr., but I think that there's a small chance that there's a trade for Trey Smith because he was just tagged today. I think that the Vikings could benefit greatly from going and getting a guy like Trey Smith. That would really make that offensive line bounds and leaps better.
Mhm.
And that brings you to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, this one to me is a pretty easy pick. Kelvin Banks is one of those kind of guys who could be a tackle or be a guard. And I think in this case, he's going to be best served as a guard just because the guard position was like debilitating for the Texans throughout the season, where you have fine tackles, but when your guards are this bad, it just leaves CJ Stroud not having any time. And, typically teams abstain from drafting guards this early, but Kelvin Banks to me is a really easy choice just because he has that versatility if either of your tackles end up walking. But he's also one of those kind of hybrid guard tackle guys. Whereas I think a guy like Josh Simmons, who may be a better pure tackle, is much more of an actual tackle, not just someone who can also be guard as well.
Yeah, CJ Stroud faced 274 pressures this year.
Yeah.
You can't let that happen again. You just can't. And I think the guards were mostly to blame there. Here with the Rams, it's an interesting spot here because Sean McVay has a lot to think about because obviously there's been a lot of talks about Matthew Stafford requesting a trade. There's been um I don't know if I would say talks, but rumors that the front office is upset with Kelly Stafford's talking on her podcast. But the Rams here, they would have loved for Colston Loveland to fall here. You can't take Gunnar Helm this far down, but you do need a tackle. Josh Simmons right here could be great. And I think that it's just been a struggle for the Rams protecting Stafford. And I think that's part of the reason that he wants out. You have two really good wide receivers right now. We don't know if Cooper Cup will be back. But whoever your next quarterback is, whether you let Stetson Bennett get a chance or not, I think you need to protect him. Josh Simmons is just a really good guy, and I can't let the Ravens get him. I just can't.
So that leaves me with the Ravens, and I'm very happy to be in this position because you have the choice between Michael Williams or Shamar Stewart. guys who both were athletic freaks and guys who were really good in the Senior Bowl. At least Shamar Stewart was. And so I'm a little bit more inclined to pick someone who was just dominant against NFL draft talent, and that to me is Shamar Stewart. Both these guys have really good traits, but Shamar Stewart's one of those guys that you can line up at edge rusher, or you could kind of convert him to a three technique defensive tackle. But Shamar Stewart was not super productive in college, but I already kind of went on my spiel that teams tend to draft for traits more so than the actual production. And, pass rush win rate of 12%, not great. It's okay, but really good run defender already, and someone who has those athletic traits that could develop into a really good pass rusher.
Uh, I'm sad because this was this was gonna be my pick right here. My gosh, I would have loved Shamar Stewart, but Michael Williams is not a bad consolation prize. By the way, I was always going edge here. I don't care who was on the board. There was going to be an edge taken here. Michael Williams is a freak. He is really good in run defense. He can get there in pass rush snaps because of the presence of DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil, and Aiden Hutchinson along the D line. You can just plug this guy and start him as a rotational pass rusher or run defense early in his career with what's his name, Zadarius Smith being here. He likes us for now, but
You never know, man. Zadarius, he tends to switch up quick.
yeah, and this will be your backup plan. This is a really good player, and as we know, Brad Holmes just likes to take really good players, and we need an edge bad.
And that leaves me with the Commanders. So the Commanders are at a fun spot because while they have a ton of cap space, they also have quite a few needs just because a lot of their key contributors last season were free agents and they're guys who they got good value off of. But when you sign such short term deals, that value is only short term. And so you're going to have to either extend some of these guys, sign people in free agency, and that leaves a lot of kind of potential holes that exist in their team. And so, they have needs at wide receiver to kind of pair with Terry McLaurin. But I think at this point, you still have really good defensive linemen. And probably the easiest one is going to be Nick Scorton. I may be saying that name wrong, but he's someone who's really good, was great in the SEC, which is not really an easy feat. I think he's listed as an edge rusher in this PFF mock draft. But yeah, he's someone that's really good and seems like a great personality fit as well. And the Commanders' culture has changed quite a bit since moving on from their previous owner. But yeah, 285 is really big for an edge rusher, so he could be
Big
moved
boy.
inside. Yeah, no, definitely a big guy, but I think he's someone who would really benefit from being with the Commanders, who have a really bright future going ahead after hitting on Jaden Daniels.
I agree. And this is a fun spot right here with the Buffalo Bills. I think them listing wide receiver as a top need is blatantly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You have Khalil Shakir, who just had a breakout season and got re-signed. You have Keon Coleman. You have a good duo there and depth behind it. One thing that we do have to keep an eye on here for the Bills is the situation surrounding James Cook. He's planning to hold out for a $15 million contract, 15 million per year. And I with the shelf life of running backs these days, I don't know if the Bills will be comfortable giving him that on a second contract. And if that's the case, Omari and Hampton here could be a good pick. And I just don't know if any of the corners here are worth it because you just have Amos who is one of the choices. I believe he's a bit oh, he's a bigger receiver. I mean corner, but Savon Revel, he's a more pure cover guy right here.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't think that the James Cook situation is going to work out. And Omarion Hampton is just a really good player. I think that you take him right here. You're back end of the first. It's a decent spot for him.
Yeah, that's an interesting pick because they do have Ray Davis, who they drafted towards the middle rounds last season, and he was pretty solid. But you're right, there may be potential kind of fallout between them and James Cook. I mean, maybe the salary cap going up could be kind of a alleviator of those issues because
Yeah.
paying $15 million this year is much different than last year, just given how much it's gone up. But yeah, I think that could be a very interesting choice for the Bills. I think with the Chiefs, you have a pretty easy choice here because your problem is just that your tackles were not good. Like you had to move out Joe Tooney, who's a really good guard. You had to move him out to tackle. And don't get me wrong, he was solid as a tackle, but that created another hole at guard. And so I think you're going to need someone who you can really trust at tackle. I think Gray Zabel is probably the best offensive lineman in this draft, or maybe the best versatile offensive lineman. I'm really torn between him or Connerly because like aside from the one rep Connerly had against Mike Green, he was really good in the Senior Bowl, and so I think I'm going to go Gray Zabel. They franchise tagged Trey Smith, so they don't really have a need at guard, and Zabel can play guard or center or tackle. But I mean, he's 6'6", like he's really long, and he's
Yeah.
305, which is not super heavy for a tackle position, but he's someone who's really versatile. So if you do have some sort of injury problem go down, you can still kind of make that pick. I think Gray Zabel is a really good player for the Chiefs to have.
Yeah. I agree. The Joe Tooney at tackle was never going to work.
Mhm.
And I think that that was solely the reason why they lost the Super Bowl because they just couldn't block on the interior because you had Joe Tooney kick out to the left. He was horrible there, don't get me wrong, but the interior suffered because of it.
Mhm.
And to round us out here, an interesting spot because the Eagles, we all know what they love to do. They love to attack the trenches. And I think this is a good spot for Princely Yellen. He's an athlete here. 6'4", 255. This is the prototypical Howie Roseman pick. He's developmental in nature. He was already really good pass rushing with a
Mhm.
22.8% win rate. And I think that you could just sit him for a minute until he's ready and just do kind of what you've been doing from from this for the last few years, just building the defensive trenches and making sure that you're just ready for the future because you don't know when Brandon Graham is done. He should be done pretty soon though. He's got 2 rings now. But yeah, this is a good spot for him. So this is our draft. It was interesting to see Abdul Carter fall as far as he did in this
Mhm.
draft because I it just was a bad board for him. Shadur Sanders, he could have fallen as far as what down to where the Saints are. He could have fallen even further, but we had him go to the Giants, and I think that that's the right fit for him. But Abdul Carter just kind of was the odd man out because the Patriots have bigger needs, and Jacksonville here they don't need edge. They have 2 really good ones. So seeing Abdul Carter fall was interesting, and we went down the board and got Malachi Starks into the first round. I I think it's interesting because seeing as how Brian Branch fell all the way to 45, I believe in his draft. I hope that teams are starting to realize how much of a mistake that is of letting safeties fall as far as they do. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting draft. I think we kind of drafted a little more kind of BPA than just needs. But
Yeah.
there were some really interesting picks. I think Mike Green falling to 15 would be a dream scenario for the Falcons.
Yeah.
I think Omarion Hampton makes for a really interesting kind of tail end of the first round. I think
Yeah.
the Vikings getting Derek Harmon would be really, really happy because they've needed interior pressure for some time now, and he's kind of your perfect guy to accomplish that. Someone who was really productive in college. I think the Packers may break from their tradition, getting Matthew Golden, who's a pretty solid athlete and is a really good receiver. But yeah, I think this would be a really fun first round. And one thing that bothers me a little bit is whenever people say this draft isn't that great. I mean, this draft doesn't have like elite quarterbacks that are going to go six to the first round like last year, but you have such good trench guys that
Oh yeah.
like they may not be the flashiest guys who are going to like blow up the combine or are going to be super notable picks, but you have like quite possibly the best defensive line draft you've had in like 10 years. And so yeah, I think it's going to be really fun for teams that need those players, which a lot of teams do. And so yeah, I think this is a really fun year to kind of get into the whole meat of the draft because we got some good players to talk about.
And don't even get me started on the running back
No,
class.
100%. Yeah.
My gosh, it is deep in the trenches, and you have versatility. That's the thing that we pointed out a lot. You have a lot of tackles that are probably going to kick inside the guard. You have some guards here who could play tackle. It's interesting that Tyler Booker fell out of the first round in this draft, where he could really go as high as the Bears if they decide to go that
Mhm.
direction. But yeah, this is going to be a fun offseason. A lot of this depends on how free agency goes as well. And we just had a fun first day of the combine with James Pierce going sub 4.5, and yeah, I think that the 40 time record might fall again this year.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, this
it's a good time to be a football fan, man.
oh man, especially the off season is fun, man.
Mhm.
But yeah, thanks for coming on. Do you have anything coming out that you want to plug?
Yeah, so I'm kind of teamed up with the FF Face Off YouTube channel, and so we'll be kind of putting out videos soon covering draft stuff, free agency, the whole kind of football nerd things that people like to watch. So yeah, look forward to that. And thanks for having me on, man. It's always a good time talking to you.
Yeah, man, anytime. And as always, everybody keep it smooth and enjoy the off season, man. This is going to be great.